new true crime podcast you need to hear to believe.
I need police right now. I've just started broken into my house.
2 men dead at the hands of a teenager and almost every moment recorded.
Please, don't move.
Put the knife down.
I was just trying to help her.
What happened at Alba Beach was as horrific as it was baffling.
There's so much contradiction. We should know more than we know.
I'm Adam Hegarty. I'll take you inside one of the country's most confusing investigations in this exclusive 60 Minutes podcast.
Ambulance, police, inquest, a domino effect of failures. It's killing us.
I'm not a police officer anymore. I can speak more freely.
Alba Beach, Death at the Door, wherever you get your podcasts.
The Australian Financial Review.
Hello, I'm James Thomson, Senior Chanticleer columnist at the AFR. Welcome to our weekly news breakdown of all things business, finance and markets. With me today, as always, is my Chanticleer colleague. We love him more than the baby boomers love their big bank dividends. It's Anthony Macdonald. How are you, Anthony?
Not possible, James. Those unfranked dividends are the unsung heroes of Australian shares.
Indeed. This week we examine the Big Four's big problem, explain why the RBA is stuck, and ask what the stunning win of Zohran Mamdani in the New York Mayoral race tells investors and CEOs.
But James, let's start with the big news on Friday morning. Elon Musk's $1.5 trillion retention package, a number so big, I had to check it a few times. James, $1 trillion, that's 1 million times 1 million. We're talking big numbers here. What's going on there?
Well, this has been something that he has wanted to get for some time. It's basically a package of shares and options that will increase his equity in the business from 15% to about 30%. Mm-hmm. And he says he needs to get that because he wants to feel like he's in control of this business or has strong influence over the business. As Tesla morphs from a electric car company, it'll still be an electric car company, into a humanoid robot company. So these are these Optimus robots that Musk wants to produce. He wants to make an army of them. He reckons he can knock out 1 billion of these things a year eventually. And he thinks they're going to end poverty. They could stop all crime. They could make us all healthy. They could grow the world economy by 10 times what it is today. And he wants to be at the center of this. So I think it's not so much about the money. I mean, that 1.5 trillion figure is huge, and he's got to do a lot to get there, including increasing Tesla's market value from about 1.4 trillion US today to 8.5 trillion US in 10 years. Mm-hmm. So that's a fairly big hurdle.
Yeah.
But it's, as I said, it's not about the money for Musk. This is about control and influence. He wants to be at the center of your life, Anthony. You get in a Tesla robo-taxi, Elon Musk's fingerprints on it. You come home and the Optimus robot's washing the dishes, you're going to see Elon Musk's face on that humanoid robot.
Does this set any sort of precedent? Like, could this spread to other companies, or is just Elon Musk, is Tesla just such a one-off?
Don't know. I think Tesla's a one-off, but you wouldn't be shocked to see other businesses have a go at it. I mean, just the scale of some of these new AI businesses, like OpenAI, they're already talking about $1 trillion US startup. I mean, this thing's barely a company. Mm-hmm. So maybe there is another massive deal out there, but I don't know. There's only one Elon Musk, and maybe that's a good thing. Anthony, speaking of AI, the AI party came to Australia this week again when a little-known Australian company called Iron, it signed a 5-year, $15 billion deal with Microsoft, which will see Iron provide the tech giant with access to, you guessed it, NVIDIA-powered data centres. Mm-hmm. Now, shares in Iron, I can't believe this. This company's run by two brothers from Sydney, Will and Dan Roberts. They took off again this week. They're up 30% this week. They're up 1,135% in 6 months.
Wow.
Now, the Roberts boys are billionaires, comfortably billionaires, and they're billionaires with a bullet, you might say. But Anthony, what's this deal all about? I'm hearing a lot about the Neo Cloud. You're a sort of Neo Cloud guy. Can you explain this to us?
Thought you'd never ask about the neocloud, James.
I know, you've been waiting for a couple of episodes now.
Got to be honest, I'd only heard of the neocloud for the first time a couple of months ago, but it's just popping up more and more and more. So neoclouds are a big part of what's going on with the AI boom or bubble globally, James. They're big data center customers, really. I mean, sometimes they're data center owners as well, but they basically own and sell computer power, or GPUs, as they say, required to power AI. It's all about the AI tokens. It's all about the way that AI learns information, breaks it down, and then generates answers. It requires these things called AI tokens, which is basically breaking words and things like punctuation up into little pieces and then puts them together again to form answers. Now, these AI tokens are basically, there's lots of buzzing around every time you ask a question or every time you get an answer out of your ChatGPT or whatever generative AI system you're using. And all these AI tokens, they require a lot of energy. So we need these big data centers now. They call them AI factories. And that's where the neoclouds are fitting in, James. So we've got firms here in Australia, like you said, Iron. So they're based in Sydney, listed in the US, got assets offshore. These new players are sort of popping out of the ground. Often they were Bitcoin miners. But what they're good at is basically having a lot of computer power in as small space as possible, which makes it easier to manufacture and deal with all these AI tokens. Enables them to do it as efficiently as possible. The game's changing in data centers. Like we still have all the normal data centers we've always had, which is all about, replacing the servers inside office buildings. And as people have shifted to the cloud, they're sort of hosting the data. So that's the data centers we've normally had. That's, been NextDC's forte and, Goodman Group's getting into those and everything. Now we're still going to need more of them because there's more sort of data floating around, more cloud usage. Yeah. But on top of that, we've got this new part of the data center market, these AI factories, and these neoclouds are the ones that are getting in and running these AI factories on behalf of the big sort of OpenAIs, Amazons, Googles of the world.
Yeah, you mentioned, Anthony, that a lot of these new neo-cloud providers used to do something else, and Iron's a great example of that. I mean, about 3 years ago, these guys were absolutely on the bones of their bum. That they had creditors chasing them. The Bitcoin price had fallen through the toilet, and so their data centers were running hard but not generating a whole lot of revenue because the Bitcoin price was down. In comes AI, quick pivot. Out goes Bitcoin, in comes the Neo Cloud, and all of a sudden everyone's swimming in clover. I mean, good luck to them. The Roberts brothers have done a good job of building this company, staying the course, and pivoting is totally fine. I just look at that share price gain in 6 months, 1,135%, and that just screams FOMO to me. That is speculative froth and FOMO. These guys have seen this before. Share price goes up, share price goes down. So they're probably used to that roller coaster, but it's a great example of the froth coming to Australia.
100%. Now, this stuff didn't exist only a couple of years ago, James. Like you said, they were chasing Bitcoin back in the day and mining for Bitcoin and had these sort of sheds with lots of computer power in them for Bitcoin. Now they're turning themselves into AI factories. But they're only as good as the contracts they're going to write with the likes of Microsoft. But, $15 billion contract. What other company in Australia would be able to boast a $15 billion contract like that? Like the numbers, once again, we talk about this every week at the moment. Yeah. The numbers they're throwing around is just nuts.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Now, James, the week started. You tipped us a winner of the Melbourne Cup. In half yours. Thank you very much. The other race that stopped the nation was in New York, where the 34-year-old Socialist Democrat candidate Zohran Mamdani swept to victory after promising to freeze rents, set up city-controlled grocery stores, and make childcare free, and pay for it all with higher taxes on the rich and big companies. James, you wrote this week these victories shouldn't be ignored by investors and CEOs in Australia. Why is that?
Well, this is the cost of that intergenerational inequality that we've been talking about all year, Anthony. This is this is why when Jim Chalmers opened the Economic Reform Roundtable, he had those charts showing, the tax burden that young people are going to pay and how it's going to increase as the Australian population ages. What has swept Mamdani to victory is younger voters. It was the biggest turnout in a New York election in, I think 60 odd years.
Yeah, wow.
And lots of Gen Z, lots of millennial voters have propelled him to office because I think they look at some of these suggestions that he's got, freezing rents, setting up city-controlled grocery stores, making childcare free. They probably think, oh, look, I don't know if all that stuff's going to work, but at least somebody is throwing up some solutions about the cost of living and the fact that I can't get on the property ladder, or that 55% of my income goes towards rent as it does in New York City. So I think this is a lesson for well beyond the 5 boroughs of New York. This is for all politicians. You know, young people feel like they're being left behind. What does that lead to? It leads to them supporting politicians with out there solutions. It leads to polarisation. What does polarisation lead to? More government intervention. And that's what Mamdani is promising. What does government intervention ultimately lead to? More inflation, worse returns from investors. And again, the cycle keeps going. You get, inflation, as we've seen in the last year, just leads to more and more polarisation because it inevitably leaves some people behind. I think this is one to watch. It feels like a long way away. We've had this sort of slightly hilarious scene of all the Wall Street billionaires sooking about this guy, and now they're sort of having to suck up to him a little bit. Even Donald Trump, who was telling him, Mamdani, that he would cut off all funding to New York, is now saying, oh, look, we'll work with the guy. So I think this is just another symptom of polarisation, a different type of polarisation. When we've had people like Matt Common come on this podcast and say the social compact with young people is being broken, this is the outworking, isn't it, Anthony? This is where you can get to.
This is a very, very blunt way of showing that if the current generation of politicians don't fix the generational wealth divide, or don't at least give the young people hope that they have a chance of being as well off as their parents, then the people are going to fix it for them, James. Like the beauty of the democracy is that everyone gets a vote. And as we just saw, you said people turned out because like this outcome or not, we can get these change agents come through the system if the current mob doesn't do it. So I think both the major political parties here should be watching this and thinking, all right, what are we doing about our own problems here in Australia, and how do we sort of attract the voters? How do we represent the actual people before they do something that was unforeseen previously?
Yeah, and it's a reminder too, Anthony, that the electoral power balance is not going to sit with the baby boomers for much longer. It's going to move to millennials and Gen Zs, which, not to get political here in Australia, it does make the spectacle of the coalition sort of tearing itself to bits about net zero at the moment, which I think would be broadly supported among younger generations. It makes it a little incongruous. But anyway, politics is a strange animal. But I don't think investors and CEOs can afford to take their eyes off this sort of change, because they're the ones who'll be dealing with the government intervention that comes from it.
Absolutely, they will. Okay, James, let's move to our first big topic of the week. And it's been a huge week for Australia's banks. On Monday, we had full-year results from Westpac. On Thursday, it was National Australia Bank's turn. And on Friday, we got half-year results from Macquarie. James, our big banks are in quite different positions, but there was a unifying theme that's come out across this week, wasn't there?
Yeah, it's costs. I think Anthony Miller, the chief executive of Westpac, he said it best. Basically, you start every year and you can lock in the fact that your costs are going to go up 4 to 5%.
Yeah, ouch.
There's no way out of it. Salaries are going up. Your technology costs are going up. Other sort of costs in the business, rents, procurement, they're going up. Lock it in, and you got to work very, very hard to just stand still on the cost front. And on the other side of the coin, revenue growth is really, really hard to find.
Yeah.
Banks are killing each other, whacking each other for any wins in mortgages, any wins in business banking, even any wins in deposits. So we are seeing more intense competition and more pressure on margins. So both sides of the business are really hard for the banks. It's hard to grow revenue. It's hard to keep a lid on costs. And that makes profitability pretty tepid. I mean, I think we've seen, low single percentage profit growth, and even in some cases profits going backwards by low single digits this week. And I think that's the story of banking now, which makes it sort of strange that investors have bid these banks up, by an average of about 20% this year. But people are willing to cop that. They understand the growth story is pretty tepid, but they seem willing to just jump into these stocks, Anthony.
Yeah, it's bloody expensive to run a bank, James. Like if you look at Westpac, had 35,000 staff, spent $6.6 billion on those staff. That's nearly $190K a head. They spent $3 billion on technology costs. That's nearly $90K a person in technology costs. Like, they're stunning numbers.
Yeah,
so its expenses were up 9%. If you exclude some restructuring costs, because there are some restructuring going through the banks, I mean, they're up 6%. NAB, same thing. Personnel expenses, $6.1 billion, 40,000 employees. That's about $150K a head. And you can do the same calcs on their technology spend. It's less than Westpac's, but it's still like $50,000 a head. So it's just amazing the way that the expenses are growing through these banks. And funnily enough, James, to find the expense number in either of these two banks' presentations, you have to dig down to slide 21 or slide 22. Like, it's not glamorous for the CEOs to talk about.
Yeah.
But there's not much more important for investors.
Absolutely. Anthony, let's take a quick look at each of the banks individually. As I said, Anthony Miller at Westpac, he's relatively new in the job. He started at the end of last year. He's trying to pull off something pretty difficult here, though. He's rebuilding Westpac's entire tech platform, a big thing called Project Unite, while he's also trying to keep the core banking operations running smoothly and fighting off the competition. I mean, this is a fair juggling act, isn't it?
It is a real juggling act, James. And he's got this Project Unite, like you said, unifying the tech platforms. Westpac's got these legacy brands, legacy systems, and he's trying to bring it all together. He picked this up from Peter King, his old boss, and he's really trying to make it his own. He sort of wedded himself to it on day one. I remember, James, and you would too, when we interviewed him when he got the job. You remember how he just committed himself straight away?
Yeah.
Project Unite, so important for the bank. We're going to do it. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing for customers, the right thing for shareholders, the right thing for staff. His big stakeholder groups. So he takes the job, I think it was December last year. And then the first time the market really hears from him in a big way was an investor day, and it's all about Project Unite. He's just absolutely...
He's all in.
He is all in. He's pinned himself on Project Unite, and directionally sounds like the right thing to do.
Totally.
Particularly when you consider, we've just spoken about the direction of Westpac's expenses and tech spending in particular, the chance to nip it in the bud sort of once and for all. However, James, one thing Australian banks and corporates more broadly can really trip up on, it's IT integration.
Yeah.
And, businesses, they're great at going out and spending money, buying other businesses, all that sort of stuff. But actually unifying everything, dealing with technological change, setting up a bank that's full of 1980s and 1990s systems with something that is adequate and efficient in 2025. It's really, really hard to do. Can he do it? To your question, well, he has to, because unlike ANZ's Nuno Matos, like I said, he absolutely pinned himself to Project Unite. So I think we'll see Anthony Miller's reign at Westpac doing everything he can to get this project over the line. This week with the results, we did see that the timeline had slipped a little bit. It's going to cost a little bit more than expected this financial year.
Shock horror.
Miller's no dummy. He's much more aware of these issues than anyone. If he gets it right, Westpac should come out much cleaner, more competitive Big Four bank. Perhaps it gets back to like it was 10 years ago, where it was sort of mentioned in the same breath as Commonwealth Bank when it came to mortgages and deposits. Whereas now it's sort of, back in the NAB and ANZ pack. So I don't know. If he gets it right, the upside's there. What about NAB, James? The CEO, Andrew Irvine, says he wants to be the boring bank. What's he trying to say there? And why didn't investors like his result?
Well, he's trying to have a go, I think, a subtle go at Westpac with their big bang Project Unite, and of course at ANZ with Nuno Matos's big transformation there. So he's trying to say, we're not going to lurch from big strategic initiative to big strategic initiative. I'm just going to be steady and consistent and run this bank, in a, not a conservative way, but in a careful way, trying to grow each year, do a little bit better, keep that coming through and keep an even keel. I think that's a reasonable way to approach it. Certainly bank investors have traditionally liked consistency and safety, so that's fair enough. But they didn't love this result, Anthony. And part of that went to the amount of capital that NAB has. Now, there's a little bit of a fall in what's called their Tier 1 capital ratio. Nothing major, nothing hugely worrying, but it gets back to that thing we mentioned right at the top of the podcast. That's dividends. If your capital ratio starts to slip, does that mean the bank needs to wind those dividends back? Now, there is no words that bank investors hate more than that. Please, you can take our freedom, but do not touch our bank dividends. Irvine basically said, look, calm down, everybody. We've taken a little capital overlay that will eventually wind off. We're growing nicely in our loans. It's all going to be okay. And he didn't, the banks never make promises about dividends going forward. But the implication was, relax everyone, this isn't a big deal. But I think it's something that people will continue to watch. And Irvine might want to be the boring bank, but if there's any risk around a bank dividends, things aren't going to be very boring for you at all.
No, NAB's earnings call is one of the least boring ones, James. I thought it was pretty interesting because, it started off, Andrew Irvine seemed pretty bullish in his pre-prepared comments, clearly very happy with the way that NAB's defended its business banking patch, and he loves the deposit growth and the way it's used deposit growth to fund an increase in its loan book. But then you could tell the analysts are a little bit antsy, and some of the questions were actually quite spiky.
They were.
It was definitely not boring.
No, indeed. And finally, on Friday morning, Anthony, we had the half-year result from Macquarie. It's been a tough year for Shamara Wickramanayake in some ways. She's had run-ins with the regulators and even her own shareholders. And this result wasn't all that well received either. Yeah,
very flat, James. Pretty flat profit year on year. I think it was up 3% compared to the same time last year. Shares down 6.5% on Friday morning. I think it tells you everything you need to know. The result itself, it was fine, right? There's still big numbers flowing through the Macquarie machine. But the thing that people still can't get their finger on is the way this Commodity and Global Markets unit, which smashed it out of the park a few years ago and absolutely blew Macquarie's profit to all-time record levels. Its profit was down 15% this half compared to the same time last year, and I still think that investors and analysts don't really understand why. They don't really know what's driving it.
I can help there, Anthony. I can help there, yeah. Actually, I think the CGM result, the Commodities Division result, it's okay. I mean, commodity prices around the world are generally down. There's not the volatility we saw a few years ago, like that monster profit was about everyone going crazy when Russia invaded Ukraine and we all thought there'd be no energy in the world. And they're investing a whole lot in new tech platforms, which, if Westpac's allowed to do it, why isn't Macquarie in its commodities business? But you're right. I think people just can't quite wrap their heads around this one, and it's the reason the result's a bit soft.
Yeah, just see, in terms of the local bank, like Macquarie's obviously got this Australian bank in there, mortgages and deposits like everyone else on the street. You see that 21% growth in the average home loan portfolio compared to the same time last year, 27% growth in the deposit portfolio, James. That's huge. I think Westpac had 5% increases in mortgages. NAB was 4%. On deposit side, it was 10% at Westpac, 9% at NAB. But Macquarie has got 2 or 3 times both of them. It's absolutely blown them out of the water.
Great disruptor. Okay, Anthony, let's jump to our second topic. And on Tuesday, I was prancing around the mounting yard at Flemington, placing a few last-minute bets while the dead certainty of the monetary policy year came in. Michelle Bullock and the RBA kept rates on hold, as expected, at 3.6% and made it very clear that the RBA doesn't have a lot of room to move. Anthony, it was all pretty predictable given last week's inflation numbers came in much hotter than expected, but I reckon economists are sort of divided as to whether the RBA will cut again in the next 6 months now. We need you to do a bit of translating for us. What's Michelle Bullock so worried about?
Well, I think we should all be worried about it, James, and it's Australia's lack of productivity, what that means for our economic outlook. I mean, what we're seeing is that as soon as the economy gets a little bit stronger, and particularly the private sector I'm talking about here, inflation takes off. And we are so capacity constrained that it's too hard to grow anything more than, fairly mediocre type growth, your 1.8 or 2% without putting pressure on prices. And James, that's troubling, right? Australians should be worried about this. The jobs market's tight already. If it gets even tighter, wages go up, expenses go up, everything costs a little bit more. We just don't have the abundance of supply to soak up any material increase in demand. So in a way, we're almost victim of our own ineptness here. We look decent when the economy is muddling along, but we just don't have the productivity or the resources or perhaps even the leadership to handle the sort of growth we were lucky enough to have for decades, James, which was, productive growth where the economy could grow without kicking off the inflation problem. So basically, as soon as we get the economy into third or fourth gear at the moment, the RBA have to think about bringing it back a notch. which it's not a great place. As someone who wants to see all Australians live a more comfortable life than they have today, it's not the place we want to be.
This is why we bang on about productivity, Anthony, and I know it's a really vague term, but it's basically better productivity equals better living standards and lower inflation and lower interest rates. Yeah. At the moment, crappy productivity is equaling higher inflation and interest rates that can't fall. It's sort of that simple.
Yeah, the silver lining out of it, James, perhaps though, is the economy's going well enough. And I thought the bank CEOs were pretty upbeat on the domestic economy this week too. So is the good news to take out of this that the economy doesn't need much more help, that perhaps the RBA's era of meddling in all this is over?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Anthony. I thought both Anthony Miller and Andrew Irvine were actually quite bullish. Yeah. And what that says to me, I mean, the good stat I thought from NAB was that their business loan growth in the last 6 months, ended September, was 5.8%. Mm-hmm. That was the fastest 6-month period in the last 3.5 years. Yeah, so right. What that says to me, Anthony, is that the rate cuts the RBA has previously delivered, they're still flowing through the economy, which makes perfect sense because that old sort of economist adage is that, it takes 12 to 18 months for a rate cut to come through. So the RBA is still dealing with the backwash of the work it's done previously. So that maybe is a good news story that we still can rely on a bit of that support the RBA has previously given us. But I want to pull something else out of the bank results that I reckon Michelle Bullock would have looked really hard at this week. I know she tells us over and over again that she doesn't target house prices, and that's not her job. Totally get that. But in Westpac's presentation deck, they said that they expect house prices will climb 9% in the next 12 months. 9%, Anthony. Surely, if nothing else, Michelle Bullock sees that and thinks, here comes the inflation.
Yeah, like you. I mean, I was surprised to see that 9% forecast, James. I mean, I know it's hot out there and it's getting hotter. And that third interest rate cut hasn't really filtered into the market yet, but 9% is a lot, and consider that house prices are already up 6% or so this year. They've been up strongly for the 2 years before that. I mean, we could be in a situation where house prices have doubled in Brisbane and Perth in like 6 years.
Yikes.
If Westpac's right. I think they're up 50% in Sydney, 30% in Melbourne, James. It's just off the chart. You've got to wonder what stress that's putting out there for the people actually taking these mortgages, which are, bigger by nature because they're buying more expensive homes. But the other thing we know, James, is about 2/3 of Australians own a home, either outright or with a mortgage. And for ones that have it, and your house price is going up, you tend to feel good about the world, right?
Indeed.
That's the wealth effect. You're more likely to spend, more likely to buy a new car, more likely to spend on their own home. Michelle Bullock even called out this week, she gave us an example. Has anyone tried to get a tradesperson recently, to fix the washers in the shower or a leaky roof or whatever? It's really hard to get them. Yep. It's just a sign that the capacity in the economy is not there, it's already pretty tight. So that's fueling the spending, James, fueling the inflation. And the other thing that's fueling it is the banks, right? And we've had our heads in banks all weeks, but strong house prices are great for the banks, right? Like the higher prices should mean bigger mortgages, loan book growth. And the RBA also called out the competition between the banks and said the banks were writing these loans at a lot smaller profit above the cash rate than they did pre-pandemic, which is just a sign of the competition in the sector and also the way they've been able to raise deposits, which are a cheaper source of funding, and put them out there as well. So the banks are also fueling this along. And I hate to pinch a line, but I just came away from that press conference on Tuesday really thinking that the housing market's eating everything. And I know you wrote that in 2024, but I couldn't have agreed more. But what do you reckon, James? This time last year, your chief rates forecaster for the Chanticleer podcast, you did so well in predicting that the cuts wouldn't come till February 2025. Where's the next move? Is it up, down, and when do you think it happens?
I can't see it being up, Anthony. I think Michelle Bullock's inclination is still to provide the economy with support. I think each and every press conference she talks about how she realises people are doing it really tough and how tough they've done it for some time with both inflation and high interest rates. So I think the inclination is still to provide the economy with more support, but I just can't see them doing it in the next 6 months. The cautious move, the smart move for the RBA is just to sit on their hands and see how this plays out. I don't think there's any rush to do anything. Anthony, you've been in the hold camp for a while. How long could the hold extend for?
Yeah, I reckon we're holding for 6 or 12 months, James. But one comment in the paper on Friday morning did catch my eye. Charlie Jamieson, at Jamieson Coote Bonds, they're one of the big Australian bond fund managers, said, "It'll just take one bad employment number in Australia and we'll be back talking about rate cuts in December." His point is, be careful of what you're thinking and the way you think all this is locked in. Really, we can see one number and we'll all change our mind again.
Probably gets back to that idea that Bullock does want to help people out. So anyway, we'll see what happens. Anthony, come back after the break. We've got a few big bank results to look at and a couple of really big events going on. Back in a sec.
A new true crime podcast you need to hear to believe.
I need police right now. I'm just stabbed and broken into my house.
2 men dead at the hands of a teenager and almost every moment recorded.
Please, don't move.
Put the knife down.
I was just trying to help her.
What happened at Alba Beach was as horrific as it was baffling.
There's so much contradiction. We should know more than we know.
I'm Adam Hegarty. I'll take you inside one of the country's most confusing investigations in this exclusive 60 Minutes podcast.
Ambulance, police, inquest, a domino effect of failures. It's killing us.
I'm not a police officer anymore. I can speak more freely.
Alba Beach, death at the door, wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, welcome back. If you want to know more about what we're talking about today and a whole lot more, AFR subscribers can sign up to the Chanticleer newsletter at join.afr.com/Chanticleer. Every Saturday morning, the newsletter pulls together the best Chanticleer columns from the week and delivers them straight to your inbox. Okay, Anthony, we're back with the banks at the start of next week. ANZ have their first result under Nuno Matos on Monday, and then Matt Commons steps up to the plate at CBA with a quarterly result on Tuesday.
Yeah, it should be interesting. I mean, ANZ's, most of its news, I think, is out there. We had the big reveal only a couple of weeks ago. We know that the bank's going to stick by the dividend.
Yep.
To your point earlier, they're not changing that for anything. They know how much retail investors like it. So they're going to give everyone the dividend and then raise some of the money back and issue more shares. You got to question how sustainable that is long term, but it shows just the importance of that dividend.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how the underlying ANZ business has travelled with all this disruption that's been happening in the last few months. And that'll tell us a little bit about how big a turnaround Nuno has in front of him. All right, Anthony, in Melbourne on Wednesday and Thursday, I'm doing a bit of hosting at the ASIC Symposium. Got some great panels.
Yeah.
One on the state of the economy with Joe Longo and Leah Weckett from Coles. Mm-hmm. And I've got a Meet the Regulators panel with the heads of ASIC, APRA and the ACCC, Anthony, which I reckon is going to be really interesting. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, good luck squeezing some good comments out of them, James.
Thank you. And you're back climbing the summit for the AFR on Thursday in Sydney with the Infrastructure Summit. Big money here, Anthony. Are you talking to some of the big movers and shakers?
Sure am. This is the last big summit out of the AFR for this year, James. So yeah, it's all about the mixing of that private capital and how it's flowing into what are often government-backed projects and whether they're actually creating new assets and building them as much as it is buying them.
Yeah, absolutely. Should be a great event. All right, we love questions here on the Chanticleer podcast. This week, our questions from Hamish in New South Wales. If you've got a question you want to send in, you can email us at chanticleer@afr.com, or you can send us a question in audio form. Just record a voice memo on your phone, include your name and where you're from, and email it to us. And Hamish asks, which markets or industries do private credit firms have the biggest footprint in? This is a really timely question, Hamish.
Sure is.
Because this week ASIC was out with their new roadmap for capital markets, which included, Anthony, a pretty big whack at what they reckon is some pretty inconsistent behaviour from private credit players. I guess that's putting it nicely. So tell us, where is the private credit money in Australia going?
Property, in a nutshell.
Do tell.
Yeah, ASIC had a couple of experts try and define the private credit sector, released a report probably 2 months ago. They thought the private credit sector was worth $200 billion and 40 to 60% of that was in property. And by property, we're thinking more construction at the commercial end and the larger sort of housing end, which makes Australia's private credit sector very different to the US, which sort of started funding leverage buyouts and has gone more into the corporate sector. Now, the thing about property, James, the one thing we know, we heard this come up on NAB's analyst call again this week, the banks, when they get in trouble in Australia, they traditionally get in trouble in commercial property markets.
Yep.
So these loan books that are heavy on property, I think that in ASIC's mind just makes them worth watching a little bit more.
Yeah, totally. And a lot of the lending in private credit now is stuff the banks used to do and don't do anymore for that exact reason. They don't like that commercial property exposure as much as they once did. So, Hamish, hope that helps. I think the message from ASIC is really worth looking at. If you want to play in private credit, which is totally reasonable thing to do, understand that you're probably playing in property and that might be correlated to lots of other assets in your portfolio. So have a think about that. All right, Anthony, it's been a massive week. We'll be diving deep into the banks again next week and looking forward to bringing our listeners the best of those two big events, the Infrastructure Summit and the ASIC Symposium.
Yeah, James, enjoy the symposium. Must be nice to have one of these big talk fests on home ground in Melbourne. For a change, you always come up to Sydney for them, so I hope it goes well for you.
Thank you. No, really looking forward to it and really looking forward to chatting with you next week. If you like the podcast and want to hear more, consider sharing or giving the podcast a review as it helps other listeners find us. And don't forget to follow wherever you get your podcasts. At the Financial Review, we investigate the big stories about markets, business and power. For more, go to afr.com and you can subscribe to the Financial Review, the daily habit of successful people, at afr.com/subscribe. Chanticleer was hosted by me, James Thomson and Anthony Macdonald, and it was produced by Mandy Coolin and Alex Gow. Our theme is by Alex Gow, head of premium content is Fiona Buffini.
The Australian Financial Review.
A new true crime podcast you need to hear to believe.
I need police right now. I'm just stabbed and broken in my house.
2 men dead at the hands of a teenager and almost every moment recorded.
Please, don't move.
Put the knife down.
I was just trying to help her.
What happened at Alba Beach was as horrific as it was baffling.
There's so much contradiction. We should know more than we know.
I'm Adam Hegarty. I'll take you inside one of the country's most confusing investigations in this exclusive 60 Minutes podcast.
Ambulance, police, inquest, a domino effect of failures. It's killing us.
I'm not a police officer anymore. I can speak more freely.
Alba Beach, death at the door, wherever you get your podcasts.